Hey, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. Today in this video, I want to talk about 10 things that green belts should know. So if you're interested in that, make sure you stick around. Hi, my name is Chad, and I want to welcome you back to the channel. If you're a returning visitor, if you're not a returning visitor and it's your first time, ask that you click that subscribe button below, like this video if you like this kind of content, because I do these kind of videos on this channel. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe, become part of this community. Now, there are some things that you need to know if you want to be a Lean Six Sigma green belt. These are things that I would require. So I've been working in this field for a very long time, and I've done interviews for people. I've coached green belts, black belts alike. So I do have some experience with understanding what is needed at each stage of the process. So going from like yellow belt to green belt to black belt to master black belt. In this video, I'm covering the green belt requirements. And these aren't all the requirements. These are some basic things that all green belts should know and be expected to be questioned on, or just understand the concepts around these. Now, I've already done a video on what requirements are needed for a yellow belt. If you haven't seen that video, no worries. I'll put a link in the description below. It'll take you to that video. Also, will include a link at the end, so it'll be a video that will pop out at the very end of this video that you can just simply click on and go back and watch the yellow belt requirements. So as a Lean Six Sigma green belt, I would expect you to understand some basic charting like control charts, Paretos, histograms, scatter plots, basic charting techniques, and understand how to use those, what those mean. So that's the first one. The second thing I would expect you to understand is DMAIC, okay, and understand what is needed for a DMAIC project, what is needed at each stage of a DMAIC project, so that you would know how to complete each gate. So if you don't know what DMAIC is, it stands for define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And within each one of those gates, there are certain frameworks, certain tools that you can use and concepts that you would use and employ to get through that gate. And I would expect a green belt to know basically what tools are needed. And I'm talking about a certified green belt. Okay, I know if you're going through the program or if you're going through the process, you're learning that. But as a certified green belt, you should know those basic tools and concepts that are needed to get through each gate. And so define would be a gate, measure would be a gate, and so forth. And the third thing I'd want you to understand is how to write a problem statement. There are too many times people don't define problem statements correctly. And Albert Einstein said if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem, and then only 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. So it's very important that we understand the problem before we dive into solutions. And oftentimes, and you've probably been involved in this before, if you haven't, I promise you will be, whenever a problem comes up, a lot of times people want to jump right into the solutions and how to fix the problem without properly thinking about the problem and actually defining the problem. And oftentimes we think it's easy to define a problem, but what we really define, or we really say, are the results of the problem, or sometimes the symptoms, but we don't really talk about the problem. And there's a very clear way to do that. I won't go to it in this video. I'm going to do another video talking about root cause analysis, and I'm really going to dive into that in that video. In this video, though, I just want to talk about the problem statement and what's needed, in my opinion, or that's a needed attribute for a Six Sigma green belt, properly defining a problem. And the fourth thing I'd want you to know as a green belt is the voice of the customer. Understanding that there is a process for capturing the voice of the customer, and I'd want you to know a few ways to do that. And I'm talking about ways, simple ways that maybe you're not thinking about, but like surveys, focus groups, just connecting with the customer and doing some interviews with the customer. These are ways to collect that information. Now, come later, you want to take that information and be able to dissect it and pull apart information that you need to create some sort of project out of, or to get that information into a format where you can start articulating what you need to do to solve customer problems, or to do whatever it is that the customer needs. And the fifth thing that I would require a green belt to understand is CTQ, or critical to quality. Sometimes you see it as CTQC, critical to quality characteristics. And this is basically taking the information from you've gathered from the customer, translating that into some metrics that you can start dissecting and understanding, and making sure that you have the quality aspects of those metrics understood, that you understand those metrics, and you can start making improvements from that aspect. Are you meeting those? If not, how are you going to meet those characteristics? And the sixth thing I would want a green belt to know are basic statistics. And I'm just talking about mean, median, and mode, okay? I would want you to understand, because that goes back into some of the charts, right? Understanding the charting, or the charts that we mentioned earlier, I think number one, histograms, right, and other charts. But certainly you want to understand some basic statistics around mean, median, and mode. And I would require a green belt to understand that, and understand how it's calculated, the difference between mean, median, and mode, and then how to use that information to make decisions. The seventh thing I'd want you to know is flow, okay? And you can gather this from a couple of ways. In traditional manufacturing, like one-piece flow, you can get it from value stream maps. But if you're talking about other manufacturing facilities or other methods, you can, if you've ever heard of batching, or job shops sometimes will use something called finite capacity scheduling. But in any case, you'd want to understand value add, non-value add, and required non-value add. Anything that's non-value add, you're going to want to attack because that's considered waste. I won't go into waste in this video because that's mentioned in the yellow belt requirement. So again, I'll post a link to that in this video, also in the description below. And the 8th thing I think you should understand is problem solving. How to really solve a problem, the steps that you would go through to solve that problem. In any company or any business, they're gonna want you to solve problems. And that's almost for anything. If you can learn how to solve problems for a customer, you really can name your value. And understanding how to do that for anyone and learning the frameworks that you could use, the concepts that you can use to solve problems, is going to make you invaluable. So make sure you understand how to properly solve problems. But remember, you can't solve the problem properly unless you define it correctly to begin with. And there are various tools you can use. I've used 5 principles of problem solving. I've used 8Ds. I've used simple A3s, which is like solve it sheets, just simple problem solving methodologies. And then I've gone deeper using DMAIC to solve problems. So it's just important to understand what you have out there and know when and where to use those tools and concepts. And number 9, I think you should understand how to error proof. A green belt should really understand what it means to error proof, to countermeasure a problem so that it doesn't happen again, or you at least reduce the risk as much as possible. Now you may have heard of this as poka-yoke. This is the Japanese term. It means mistake proofing. Little side note, it used to be called the baka-yoke, which is idiot proofing. Of course, they don't use that anymore. Not very polite to say idiot proofing, I guess. But poka-yoke, or countermeasuring, or implementing a countermeasure to reduce the risk of the problem or solve it altogether, is what you're really aiming for. So understanding error proofing is something I would expect a green belt to know. And then the last and final thing is managing projects. Now, as a green belt, I wouldn't expect you to manage a ton of projects. I certainly would expect you to manage your project, but it would be nice to know if you can manage maybe a couple of projects, and that would get you prepped up for being a black belt and managing multiple projects. So understanding project management, understanding what tools you can use for project management, understanding a bit about the budget and things like that, is something I would want a green belt to start progressing into. Maybe not day one after you're achieving your green belt, but certainly as you progress through, and maybe you want to get your black belt or move into another role that's going to give you more responsibility, you would want to move into understanding budgets and how to manage projects. So that's my 10 expectations I would expect all green belts to know. Again, if you look at the body of knowledge for a green belt, it's quite thick. So there's other things you might be good at inside of that body of knowledge, but these are things I think are core to understanding what it means to be a green belt, or things I feel like a green belt should know without question. But if you have, if you want to challenge that, that's perfectly okay. Make sure you comment in the section below, or say, you agree with me, or maybe a couple of things that you think a green belt should know. It's perfectly okay. I love reading the comments, so make sure you comment down below. If you like this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so I know you're paying attention, or I know there's some people out there on the other side of this camera listening. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.